What if I told you that what you saw of Hamilton in Baku's practices was only the tip of the iceberg? That while everyone talked about time, in reality a technical and mental revolution was being created within Ferrari, with Lewis as a silent protagonist. Lewis Hamilton began the 2025 Azerbaijan Grand Prix with more doubts than certainties. Despite being his second full season with Ferrari, adaptations were not yet completely consolidated. The Baku circuit, with its long straight, braking criticism and areas of narrow walls, does not forgive mistakes. What not many saw live was how from the first minute on the track, Hamilton was already in trouble. The cameras showed a seemingly calm Hamilton, but internally, both he and his team were immersed in a storm of uncertainty. The free practice session 1 began with stable conditions, without wind and with temperatures that favored tire heating, but the SF25 did not respond. The first sectors showed inconsistencies in braking, with stability losses both when entering and leaving key curves. Specifically in curves 1, 3 and 15, areas where the car needs to behave with millimeter precision, Ferrari sensors reported sudden blocks and pressure loss in the rear brake system. In the second timed attempt, stopping the limit in curve 5, the SF25 slid beyond the vertex and ended up gently hitting the wall. The visible damage was a puncture in the left front tire and a misaligned front. But what the data revealed a posteriori was more worrying. The car was operating outside its optimal thermal window. The brake system, in particular, showed differences of up to 70 degrees between the front and rear axle, causing instability in each abrupt deceleration. Meanwhile, in the garage, the engineers worked counterrelage. They communicated with each other, trying to synchronize the telemetry data in real time with the sensations that Hamilton transmitted by radio. Internal recordings show how the British insisted again and again that could not stop with confidence, while requested adjustments in the brake bias and in the recovery of the hybrid system. Ferrari's technical team did not expect that type of car response in Baku. The SF25 came with a base configuration derived from the data collected in Australia and China, circuits where braking are less demanding and thermal conditions are more benign. That configuration was simply not enough for the demands of the asphalt of Azerbaijan. Carbon brakes, not reaching their ideal operating range, became unpredictable. And in Formula One, unpredictability translates into immediate performance loss. The impact of that touch with the wall, although apparently lower, was symbolic. It represented the momentary collapse of a plan that had not been calibrated for the technical particularities of Baku. Internally, Ferrari began to realize that the aerodynamic proposal with which they had reached the circuit was not only inadequate, it was dangerous for the performance of its star pilot. While other pilots such as Leclerc, Norris or Verstappen were already working on the simulations of Stint Medio, Hamilton was back in the box, with their disassembled car and the technicians reviewing each element of the braking system. The frustration on his face was notorious. Even in the unofficial shots captured by paddock cameras, he is seen gesturing with his engineers, repeatedly pointing out the steering wheel and braking areas of the circuit. When the first free practice session ended, Ferrari's garage became a technical crisis room. What should be a routine-setting day became a high-priority contingency operation. Hamilton's car was not only unstable, he had exposed a series of vulnerabilities that, if not corrected, would make him a pilot without tools to compete in Baku. It was then that Ferrari chose to execute a structural change in his approach. During the following hours, while media attention was centered on the Kronos and rumors of paddock, SF25 engineers worked on a deep reconfiguration of the car. It was not a superficial modification. The Scuderia activated what they internally call a thermal window contingency plan, a protocol reserved for scenarios where the aerodynamic and mechanical package does not deliver the expected response under specific circuit conditions. First, changes in the front brake cooling system were applied. Ferrari discreetly introduced an expanded brake duct variant, a piece that had been tested in the wind tunnel but was not planned to be used until Imola. Its premature implementation in Baku was an emergency maneuver, designed to expand the thermal brake operation range and facilitate a more stable transition between prolonged braking and rapid cooling areas, characteristics of the urban layout of Azerbaijan. But it was not enough to manage the temperature. The second change was even more significant: the redistribution of brake balance through an aggressive mapping of the energy recovery system. The regeneration of the ERS was reconfigured to discharge more power during middle braking, relieving the pressure on the traditional hydraulic system. This integration allowed Hamilton to feel a more linear and predictable response when braking, key to rebuilding his trust after morning chaos. The third and perhaps more revealing of the adjustments was the modification of the aerodynamic package. Ferrari decided to increase the aerodynamic load of the Hamilton car, sacrificing part of the peak speed in line, especially significant in the very long straight of Baku, in exchange for greater stability in braking and traction at the curve outlet. This decision was conceptually away from the configurations adopted by McLaren and Red Bull, who opted for low load to maximize speed in a straight line. This is where a crucial detail is evidenced. Ferrari customized Hamilton's car, breaking with his usual philosophy of symmetry among pilots. Leclerc, on the other hand, maintained an intermediate configuration more adapted to its driving style, focused on the passage by curve with initial aggressiveness. Instead, Hamilton needed braking security and then building its speed from stability, not from aggression. This technical separation between the two cars was a turning point within the team, as it involved accepting that each pilot required a car designed for its piloting language. The second free practice began as a continuation of the technical storm that Ferrari had crossed, but the atmosphere in the Hamilton box was completely different. The body language of the engineers was no longer tense, but calculating. The eyes they exchanged were loaded with expectation. The SF25 had reconfigured depending on the specific needs of their pilot, and now it was time to check if the numbers in telemetry could translate into real sensations on the asphalt. As soon as Hamilton crossed the pits line to start his first stint, the car responded as if it were a completely new car. From the first meters, the behavior of the SF25 was significantly more predictable. In the braking of Curve 1, one of the most critical of the circuit for its closed angle and the little visibility at the entrance, Hamilton was able to stop later and with greater aggressiveness. I no longer had to correct the steering wheel to avoid sudden survival or modulate brake pressure insecurely. Now I could attack with decision. The most impressive were not the times for return, but how he built them. Unlike many pilots who found rhythm after several laps of adaptation, Hamilton felt comfortable since his first-time turn. And that, in Baku, is a luxury that few can afford. In technical areas such as the average sector that mixes blind curves, aggressive pianos and demanding changes, the car not only remained stable, but allowed it to explore limits without crossing them. Where there were sudden blockages and corrections before, there was now fluidity. The most revealing fact was his improvement in Curve 15. During the first session, the British lost between 3 and 5 tenths with respect to the leaders in that area, the product of a braking instability that forced him to release before optimal. In the second session, with the new aerodynamic package and brake recalibration, it not only matched that record but exceeded it. In that specific curve, Hamilton was the fastest of the entire grille. That gain was no accident, it was applied engineering with surgical precision. The final time that marked 1:41.293, placing it at the head of the table, was simply the consequence of a sequence of successful decisions and a perfect level of execution. But the most significant thing was not to have surpassed Leclerc for 74 thousandths, but the way he did. Hamilton did not use strategic rebuffs or aggressive motor maps. It was a clean turn without errors, without external aids. It was his piloting in its purest form, combined with a car that finally answered him. What few noticed was that, while McLaren and Red Bull prioritized the speed in line with low-load configurations, Ferrari opted for a reverse philosophy: control, stability and precision in curves. And that decision until then was validated by the stopwatch. In a circuit where a millimeter error ends on the wall, Hamilton and Ferrari had opted for a configuration that allowed them to risk, with control. A technical paradox that only a pilot of his caliber can convert into virtue. The Azerbaijan Grand Prix had not yet begun officially, but what happened on that practical Friday was much more than a preparation day. It was a statement. Lewis Hamilton, a pilot who in recent years had been questioned, analyzed, even discarded by paddock sectors, emerged with an unequivocal message. It remains a competitive force capable of reconfiguring the hierarchical order of Formula One current, and is doing it with a Scuderia that finally begins to speak its same technical language. Then the question is inevitable. Was this just an exceptional Friday, or are we seeing the beginning of a golden stage that still has no name but already has a face? Can Hamilton build your 8th title from this turning point? And Ferrari, finally, has understood that modern success in Formula One is designed around talent, not despite him? This is where it touches you. I want to know your reading. Do you think Baku was a real breakdown point or tactical illusion that will not be held in the race? Are you seeing the true contender to the title in that SF25 dressed in red? Or is this performance circumstantial and will we return to the dominant pattern of recent years? Leave me your analysis in the comments.